Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our session this afternoon on getting ready for the summer. I am Sally Baker. I'm our Director of Education here at Family Connection of South Carolina, and I have Karen Elfner here with me today from Behavior Alliance of South Carolina. And we wanted to just kind of have a conversation today about getting ready for the summer. I can't believe it's already time to have that conversation. I feel like every month I'm like, how did another month pass? But here we are. We're pushing into May, and life is going to get busy in a different kind of way. So Karen and I have a couple of questions. We're just going to chat back and forth for a minute. And then if you guys have any questions that are listening in, you guys can feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. And this is being recorded, so feel free to keep your cameras off, turn them on if you'd like to, but know that Karen and my faces are the only ones that you will see on the recording, so you don't have to worry about that part. All right, so Karen, like I said, I cannot believe it's summertime. I can't believe we're coming up on it. But our kids, they work so hard during the year, and we all work hard, right? Even as moms and dads. And by summer, really all we want to do is relax. We want to give our kids a chance to just take a break. I know schedules and routines and keeping their learning and growing is super important during the summer. But how do we balance those two things, that relaxing and that learning growth? How do we do that in the summer months?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly there is a relationship between summertime and learning. Sometimes backs up or sometimes doesn't continue the growth that you had during the school year. However, what we do know is that it doesn't take a lot of activity of the brain, of engaging in reading or math or those kinds of concepts in order to maintain. So that's the good news. You don't have to spend like hours a day, every day, simulating a classroom in order to maintain that what your kids have learned. And also summer can be an opportunity to learn in lots of new ways and grow a lot of skills that are still good skills to have our children develop, and that will be useful as they grow into adulthood and become, productive adults. So if we can think about what they're doing and the skills that they're developing in a broader way than maybe just classroom academic kinds of things. Those are two things that I would say. But so really maintaining, I think the guideline is about 4 hours of engagement in what we might think of as more academic kinds of activities. So reading or reviewing kind of whatever, history or math, or 4 hours per week is a guideline that seems to be one that will keep you going forward and not have you sliding backwards in terms of those academic kinds of activities. But the way that most parents, I think, have found it really helpful is to try to find what works for your own kids. So not to force one style, like a workbook or, worksheets or some particular curriculum, but to, as a parent, what's going to appeal to your child. And so trying to find a method or a mechanism or something that engages them. Like my son, he loved, and this is, of course, way back when gaming was first starting, when my kids were young, but he loved gaming and he hated reading, but he loved reading the cheat books magazines. So I would buy the cheat magazines because, he would pore over those things. You couldn't get him to stop reading those magazines. So, so those are a few ideas.
I love finding, so my background is in language and literacy. So reading and not just having reading just be those chapter books where you sit down and have to read 20 minutes per day or 2 chapters a day or whatever. I love that, pulling in the cheat books. It makes me think about my own son who loves Legos. So he loves reading his Lego books and magazines that we can get access to now. So that's awesome. And the 4 hours a week, that takes a little bit of pressure off of me as a parent thinking, how do you feel all the time? And
Mhm,
making sure that they're staying current. So that's awesome. Thanks.
mhm,
Um, you know what I mean? I think the beginning of the summer, like we said, like we're all ready to like take a little breather and kind of step back.
mhm,
And we do that. And I think as parents, I know I fall into this category. Like we take that step back. Okay, we'll take off some of our agendas and you don't have to get up at the same time every morning. Because we're just enjoying that time and kind of being together. But then a few weeks in, life changes a little bit. We've all kind of settled into whatever a new normal looks like for your summer. And so maybe that behavior, we start to see more behavior outbursts or different undesired behaviors, and maybe
mhm.
it's getting worse and we're not really having a good time anymore. It's not a fun summer anymore. So if I find myself starting to look forward to the summer being back in or school being back in session, are there any good tips to help us have that happy and healthy summer where we don't just all get on each other's nerves?
Yeah, I think for the most part, that comes from there's a big change, a transition from what is a much more structured day that you have during the school year, where you have a particular routine. You have to get up, you have to do these things in the morning, get out. You have the school day, and then maybe you have certain after school activities that you are engaging in during the week, even. And so there's a pretty normal schedule and it's pretty regulated. The school days much more regulated during the day for them. And then you switch over to what, if you go from that to a completely open, wide open, where the children have no idea from day to day when they wake up what's going to happen today, that can be a really anxiety producing scenario for them. Because kids like some structure. It's comforting to have some things that they can expect on and rely on. And when they think that something's going to come and it doesn't, then that's frustrating and causes some problem behavior sometimes. So imagine if you're used to going into the office, having things being a certain way and certain people there and certain activities going on throughout your day, and then you know, all of a sudden the building isn't there, and you go in and you go, well, how am I supposed to do my job? Where am I supposed to, it would be disconcerting, right? So that's the feeling that children can have. So while we don't need to create an artificial structure from the time they wake up until the time they go to bed, but some boundaries and some structure is going to be helpful. So if you, for instance, know that there are certain things that you're going to do on a regular basis, if you have the luxury of being able to be at home with your kids, like if you're a school teacher or work in school systems in your home during the summer with your kids, and you know that on, you could say Fridays we're going to the pool and Wednesdays we're going to the park, and have that be kind of a consistent thing. And on Tuesday and Thursday we go to friends, and then even to put up a calendar with
Right.
those. And if your kids are young, maybe it's a picture calendar so that they can see what's happening. And have at least a few things that are going to be predictable. Every day doesn't have to be scheduled out, but that ability to have some predictability. And then within the day, the things that you will want to keep relatively consistent are like getting up and going to bed.
Right.
So yes, it's nice to not have to go to bed quite so early, but to completely do away with bedtimes, even for teenagers, is not a good idea, because we know the benefits of sleep and the negative things that happen when we don't get sleep, and how important that can be just to behavior and attitude. And I know how I am when I don't get good sleep. So those are some things that around the structure. I mean, I have some other ideas because we do whole trainings on helping families structure their home. But so maybe you think about, for the summer, there's something that you want to work on as a family,
Mhm.
in terms of your family climate or culture, like we're really going to work on being respectful this
Mm.
summer. This is something that we really want to work on, or being kind, or whatever it is that you want to focus on. And that's like your goal for the summer. And you talk about it and you practice it and you find opportunities to recognize it and to, emphasize it. And, or if you have a child that's, or your children are having, multiple children and they're having trouble, sharing or getting along. So picking whatever it is you think might make your home life that you is a problem, that if you could flip it on its head, and what would be the positives of that, like having good interactions with your siblings. And that's something that we're going to focus on. And then and finding those few things, and really targeting in on some of those, rather than feeling like you have to like address everything.
Right.
Just finding those few things that if I could really address those, the overall culture and experience for everyone would be improved.
I love that. I have not personally thought about using kind of those character traits that they use at school to as a theme for what to do at home. I love that idea. I know last summer, my 5-year-old and we hit that kind of wall where I hit the point where I was like, I don't know what else to do, and I went and they had sent his they use like the clothespins with their names on them for their centers at school, and they'd sent that home at the end of the school year. And so I went, I made a chart of like, these are things that you can pick and you can do. And we're doing them in like 30-minute increments. And he can move his clip. And he found a thing. And a year later, it is still on his wall because he likes it. And we're able to like say, like, you can go play in the treehouse, or you can play with your Legos, or you can do this or that. Because he would also fixate on the Legos and do that all day. And I was like, you can't just stay in your room and do Legos all day. We got to do some other things. You got to see outside. We got to check,
Mhm.
try some different things. But I love the idea of incorporating those character traits that we want to see in our kids too, into that. I love that idea.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, we're thinking a lot about what to do for this summer. And I know I mentioned to you before we started, my son personally is graduating kindergarten and we're going to first grade next. And so I'm already like, my brain is thinking, well, what do I do to get him ready for first grade? But not even big transitions like that, but even already having to think about what do we do towards the end of the summer when it gets here, because it'll be here in the blink of an eye. And
Mhm.
how do we get ready for like the next school year? How do we kind of adjust back on the other swing of it to putting life back into that routine, to get back into the first few weeks of school? Are there things that we can
Mhm.
do to kind of prepare for that starting point? I don't even want to talk about the end of the summer yet, but it's important to forward think and think about it beforehand.
Yeah. Well, definitely. I mean, the first thing is ahead of time, like weeks ahead of time, begin talking about the what's coming up with your child, so that they're anticipating, particularly for younger children where they may not be self-aware that
Mhm.
school, about time and calendars and things. So and talking in really favorable ways, like we have a few more weeks to enjoy our summer, and then we're going to get
Mhm.
to you know meet our new teachers, and the meet new friends and do these fun things, and think about whatever about that next grade that they're moving into, so that you begin really kind of hyping up the positive aspects of school. Like if they had some friends that they had at school that they really don't get to see over the summer, oh, you're going to get to go back and see so and so again that you kind of haven't really been able to talk to since you've been here all summer. um, and then also making sure, if particularly if you're changing schools, is making sure your child is familiar with the school, because that can be very anxiety producing if you're not
Mhm.
familiar. And also, when you find out your child's teacher's name, start talking. You can start to build that relationship by just talking about that person as if you know that person.
Mhm.
So, you know, Mr. Samuels is going to be great. I bet he's going to really recognize that you know how to clean up really well. And so you start talking about him as if he's a familiar person. So, and that starts to generate that kind of expectation in your children too. And then really again, sleep is going to be really key. So if you've adjusted that sleep schedule, is to readjust at least a week in advance. So, and you could do it incrementally. So if we've adjusted things an hour, maybe we do 10 minutes a night until we're back at the school bedtime. So that we're not making some massive change, expecting our children to fall asleep an hour and a half earlier than they have been all summer. And then really helping them to kind of prepare for and think through. So what do you think school is going to be like? What do you think you'll need when you're going into 5th grade? What do you, and really encouraging and opening up conversation with them about school. So because often the challenges that students have those at the beginning of school are an emotional reaction. And if the more that we can talk them through and identify any anxieties they're having or problems, and we can help smooth over some of those things, then you're less likely to have some of those concerns.
Would you also, so in thinking about backing up the bedtimes, should they also practice the wake up time
Oh,
ahead of
yeah.
school starting?
So definitely wake up times, and particularly for younger children, if you haven't had like a morning routine going on during the summer, like they can stay in their pajamas until noon, and then maybe going through and really clarifying, maybe even writing down that this is our morning routine. I'm going to wake you up. You're going to get up. You'll go to the bathroom. You'll change your clothes. You'll come down for breakfast, whatever your order of operations are, and really just explicitly put those out. And then maybe you couple days before, you kind of work through those, setting out and talk through with your kids to help them with the problem solving. So what do we need to have if we're going to school? Oh, well, I'll need, what if you take lunch, you need lunchbox. If or I need to know, what do I need to know? I need to know my student number if I'm getting lunch there, or I need a locker number if I'm getting, so that they're part of thinking through what's going to happen and being prepared. And so that can be helpful too, because then that puts some of the ownership and the feeling like they're capable, rather than feeling like you are the only one who can think of all these things, and if without you I'm lost. So it helps to develop those skills.
No, I love that, and I love the thought of the way that you phrased it earlier, of not like necessarily thinking about like what are you worried about for the school year, but like what do you think you might need. I love that kind of reframing idea, because I think every year has a new and different challenge, and especially if you are in one of those like big transition years as parents, we have enough anxiety. We worry enough for everybody. And I don't want to project that on my own kids. So I love the idea of reframing kind of how that conversation happens. I love that. Thank you. So we've got a little bit of time still. Is there anyone who has any questions they want to put in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute and see if Karen can answer your questions for you. Anything related to the summer and routines and behavior, just because we know, and we also know, right, that our kids tend to not be their best selves around, especially us as moms. Sometimes we see they're not best sides every time. And how do we work through that in the summertime? And I know for me personally, like I use a lot of family support in the summertime for childcare, and trying to keep some type of consistency among the grandparents and from myself, because even that's a challenge in and of itself, of figuring out how do we cross that bridge.
So I see someone has, what advice would you give to pass along to a camp counselor if your child's going to camp? So something that has been really helpful, we even have done this in schools. It's part of something that we use and we modify when we do person-centered planning around students, that often students that had really challenging behavior, but we found it's very helpful for all students. So it's kind of an about me thing.
Mm.
And so maybe if you don't have one at the Family Connections, I can share one with you
Yeah.
that you guys can have in post.
That'd
But
be
it
wonderful.
would tell, like, these are things that I like. These are things that I don't like. These are things that work for me. These are things that don't work for me. This is when I'm at my best. This is when things, these are things that I find challenging. So, and these are some of my favorite things. And so that it kind of gives a little bit, so that the whoever is the adult that's going to be primarily with your child has a little bit more, a deeper understanding about the child. And one of the things, like what works and what doesn't work, is probably one of my favorite things, because like if I understand that, like, harsh words are not going to work with you,
Yeah.
but what works for me is if you talk softly to me, like that, now I know right off, I'm telling you this is the effective way to share and communicate with me. And if you are a loud kind of a person, which, some people just kind of are, and they're and that's how they convey things, then that's going to turn me off, and that's not going to get the response you want. So
That's a great idea. And I have been a camp counselor, and so to have received that
mhm,
would have been lovely for some kids.
mhm.
And yeah, I love that idea. And we do have an about me, but I would love to see what you have, Karen, that we
Okay,
can absolutely send out.
sure.
And we can send it out after this training to everybody that's been on, so they can get access to it also. That's a great question. Are there
Mhm.
any other questions out there, you guys? I'll wait just a minute.
There's some other, when I was, there are a lot of really neat activities and things for advancing learning during the summer that aren't worksheet kinds of things. Like, there's a place I found, it's a messaging service. It's
Hmm.
Summer Learning Tips to Go. And it's a text messaging service. And you can sign up beginning in May, and I'll get you the link.
Yeah.
Um, and they will send you each each day a little tip, and they come in English or Spanish, delivered by text message. And it will give you things like Alphabet City, on a walk together, look for shapes of letters and buildings around you, or things like that. So it'll give you like a way to engage in learning, and
Yeah.
set up for different levels of academic levels. That's kind of fun,
Yeah.
and not so much like a workbook. And then there's another one that's called, well, they have daily math, but they have like bedtime math.
Mm,
So it's kind of fun
that's
little math
awesome.
activities. That's bedtimemath.org. So
Okay.
you can find that there. Um, and the reading tips text messages is on startwithabook.org.
Start with the book to work. I love those ideas.
And then for if you have older kids like teens and tweens, getting them involved in volunteer activities,
Mm,
and most neighborhoods or cities have links to places that you can get involved, and that's a really good way. They learn so many skills when they're in volunteer. They have to usually read, because they have to get oriented to the material. They have to learn to interact with people. They have, all the skills that they get through, it's like job skills, real
yeah,
on the job skills, but through volunteering.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, so there's just so many really neat ways to
And I
really
think,
develop.
yeah, when you just mentioned the volunteering, like I know as a youth, I volunteered at like the local library. And I thought that was super cool that I got to go, behind the scenes and like see how the books got sorted. And I think libraries are a really great resource for summertime activities too, because there's usually free, it's air conditioned, so you can, go. And a lot of libraries are doing a lot of work right now around inclusivity. So, not being afraid to take your child with you if they do have maybe some bigger behaviors, or they're, vocalized with different things. There's ways to still incorporate into areas like that. And I love that. I wouldn't have thought of that in this conversation until you just said that. I love that idea. And I
Yeah.
wrote down all those tips and tricks, all the resources you just gave to for myself personally, but also we'll get that out to everybody who's on today for
Yeah, so
sure.
libraries, I think this, in this day and age, because books are becoming sort of passe, because now everything's electronic,
Right.
that libraries are having to kind of reinvent themselves as
Mhm.
places of other activity.
Yes.
And so I think that's even more so now than it was in the past, that libraries are a really good place to look for activities. So.
And I know I've been to a couple around the state recently who have added in like sensory walking gardens, and they've got, they'll bring in different people from the community to talk about all kinds of various things, music and art. And it's like you said, they are reinventing themselves, and it's not just books, it's not just going and sitting and having to be hush quiet and read books and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of fun happening in the library systems around our state.
And one other thing that that I really thought about and came out a lot as I was exploring again, summertime. My kids have been, now I'm figuring out summertime for my grandkids, but is that encouraging time for them to be independent and figure out what they can use their downtime.
Yep.
Rather than feeling like they come to you, I'm bored, and then feeling like you're responsible for developing their entertainment for every moment of the day.
Yeah.
That skill of being able to look around and find something to do and engage yourself is something that kids are really struggling with these days, especially with this technology and the immediate gratification and entertainment and stimulation that they have on a almost 24-hour basis, which, is another thing, is that we don't want to rely on screens to fill up our kids' summer. The guidance is 4 hours for, teenagers, and
Right.
no time until 2, and then from 2 to 5, maybe an hour. Like,
Right.
that's not much of your day.
No, it's not. No, that's a really great point. And I think that's kind of where my chart at home that I use with the clip came from, when my son kept saying, I don't know what to do. And I was like, God, you have a room full of toys, go find something to do. But then really taking that step back to think through, he doesn't know how to find those things for himself yet. And like, how do I scaffold that for him? No, didn't remedy it 100%. And he just said it to me, Sunday. And I was like, you have a room full of things, but giving them that opportunity to find something, and then still have that, you're guiding them, but they still get to make the final choice. Which one do they want to go do right now? But it was hard. It's hard to fill a whole day with people at home.
Right.
So yeah, I love all of those great tips and tricks. So thank you for hanging out with us for a little bit today. And those of you who are on with us, I appreciate, your input and your questions, and we'll get those resources that Karen mentioned back out to you guys after this training. The last thing that I want to plug is do a little shameless plug for Family Connection. Our Hopes and Dreams Conference is next week. I cannot believe it is here. It is May 3rd. It's here in Richland County. It's over in the northeast side of town. So if you're local to Columbia, it is going to be over at R2I2. Registration is still open, and I'm going to drop that registration link in the chat for you guys. And we would love to have you. We have parent scholarships for parents. So if money is a concern, don't let it hold you back. We would be happy to work with you to not have to worry about that, so that you can come join us and learn from some really awesome keynote speakers. And some of Karen's counterparts are going to come hang out with us. We have Dr. Susan Thomas will be there. We have lots of really great presenters joining us. So I wanted to just throw that out there as another option for you guys. And as always, check out our calendar, and we are here for lots of trainings coming up throughout the summer months as well. So thank you again to Karen for being here with us, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon.
If you have questions, Family Connection is here to help. You can call our Family Information Center at 800-578-8750 or visit our website www.familyconnectionsc.org.